This is a true story that happened in my town. So this one Wednesday is like a normal day for the whole school. But today was different.
As a longtime horror fan, I've grown somewhat accustomed to what is often described as the genre's biggest goal, to scare. Now, don't get me wrong, at the same time, I'm one of the jumpiest people I know. I'm a cheap jump scare director's dream, but this is just a bodily response, not real terror. Because of this, I tend to walk into new horror films with no fear of really being scared. I feel like I know the rhythms, the tricks, and the way I'll respond. Sure, a gore-heavy series like Terrifier might still provoke an oh no, are they really gonna do that? Oh yeah, there it is, reaction. But once the moment passes, I'm just eager to marvel at the craft of those ooey-gooey practical effects. As for genuine fear, I honestly can't remember the last time a horror movie truly rattled me. And that doesn't mean I'm some hardened cynic. Certain true crime stories, or even worse, a devastating drama about illness and loss, will absolutely keep me awake at night. But horror films, whether it's Hereditary or Hostel, have long been my comfort zone. Sure, they might make me feel uncomfortable at times and force me to think about scary things, but true fear is a hard thing to get out of me. That comfort zone is part of the paradox of being a horror fan. Many of us, ironically, seem immune to the very thing the genre promises. Hence why it does come as a surprise to me whenever a film succeeds in making me feel even the tiniest bit of fear. I can still remember the first time that I watched Hereditary, and was forced into imagining some of the worst case scenarios regarding the people I love the most. That was far more scary than any quick jump scare could ever be. But the whole grief as horror thing has recently become a little bit overplayed. And sure, I'm a huge fan of many films that do this, but it no longer rattles me like it once did. With this era of horror starting to feel very overplayed, I think many of us horror fans have been desperate to taste something new again, which is exactly what I think Zach Cregger brings to the genre. This comedian turned horror writer-director burst onto the scene in 2022 with his debut horror film Barbarian, which was met with great praise from horror fans, but didn't see huge mainstream success at first. But his latest film Weapons has truly cemented his success beyond that of a one-hit wonder or just a horror lover's darling. Creger's 2025 film is seeing some serious mainstream success, and I couldn't be happier, as I find his approach to horror incredibly fresh and interesting, and most of all, actually kinda scary. What makes Zach Cregger so fascinating is the way that he approaches horror, not just as a vehicle for scares, but as a means of destabilizing audiences in lasting, unsettling ways. He plays with the very structure of the typical horror film, well, the typical film for that matter, to undermine our expectations about how stories are supposed to work. And part of Creger's edge does come from his comedy background, where rhythm, timing, and misdirection are everything. That precision with rhythm and surprise translates directly into his horror. In Barbarian, he applied this logic through bold, risky shifts in tone, abruptly cutting from one scene to another completely different one. And the film's opening scene makes it almost impossible to find your footing, and just when you finally think the true horror is going to unravel, the shot completely cuts away. In Barbarian, Tess is introduced to us in a terrible situation. A man is staying in the Airbnb she has booked. But Tess responds to this in an unusual way for a horror protagonist. She responds exactly how she should. She is incredibly careful, even despite the man's kind demeanour. But still, even as the film starts to feel more like a rom-com, we know that we are watching a horror film. And with Pennywise sitting right across from her, surely danger is afoot. In this, there is another important point. Creger played with casting to further wrong-foot us. Bill Skarsgård will forever be marked by his time as Pennywise, and seems set up to be the villain. And our assumptions feel confirmed by the ominous mood that Creger sets, only for Skarsgård's character to ultimately be revealed as harmless, before he dies in a brutally abrupt scene from which we immediately cut away. A moment that genuinely made my jaw drop upon first watch. Gone is the dark Detroit basement, and in its place is sunny California, where we find ourselves in an open-top car with Justin Long, who plays AJ, singing along to Ricky Tikki Tavi. Again, casting here is important. Long is known mostly for his goofy and charming roles, and he initially seemed set up to be the film's comic relief. I mean, he's literally taken us from a basement kill scene to a car sing-along. His role in the film seems to be pretty clear, but rather quickly he is revealed to be a bad guy, accused of a rape which even he cannot deny. For quite some time, Barbarian leaves us lost in regards to his connection with the opening scene, until it's revealed that he is the owner of the Airbnb where we are desperate to return to find out more. When we do return, the scene is equally hilarious and nerve-wracking. We know the horrors await, but AJ is oblivious as he ecstatically measures the newly uncovered basement, new space that he hopes will add to the property's value. Unlike Tess, who is intelligently terrified of the creepy basement, AJ has not got a care in the world. That is, until the monster finds him. Following this, a second big shift in tone comes in the form of a sudden flashback to 1982. Here we see Frank, the house's original owner, casually buying supplies for a home birth before stalking a woman into her home, a scene that makes it clear that his role is that of an abductor and murderer. The film even punctuates this shift with an aspect ratio change, visually reminding us that we've been thrust into another era, and another horror altogether. Crucially, Frank is revealed to be the true villain. The monster in the basement is not a supernatural aberration, but the tragic consequence of his crimes, a product of rape and generations of inbreeding. With this reveal, AJ and his refusal to confront his own rape too becomes aligned as the true horror of the film, so much so that he even tries to sacrifice Tess in order to save himself. At no point in the film is he redeemed. Meanwhile, the monstrous figure in the basement is revealed to be a mutated, tragic mother, and is paradoxically more sympathetic than he is. Horror here doesn't come from the grotesque, but instead from broken expectations, from realizing that the most dangerous figures are often those that can hide in plain sight. The ending takes this point to an almost absurd conclusion. In a sentimental moment, the monster saves Tess, and this plays almost like a parody of the traditional horror ending. It's so implausibly neat that it tips into absurdity, a sly commentary on the unrealistic ways that horror often tries to wrap things up neatly. This balance of tension and tonal undercutting makes Barbarian uniquely disorientating. It isn't just the shocks that sting, it's the way every shift, every cut, and every tonal swerve leaves us uncertain of the ground we're standing on. With this, Barbarian never lets us settle, and in that is where the true horror lies. Weapons takes this same philosophy and expands it into something even more ambitious. Where Barbarian shocked us through radical pivots, Weapons expands that approach by fragmenting the entire story itself. Told in chapters from different character perspectives, the film builds a puzzle around the disappearance of children in a small town, but each viewpoint offers only pieces of the truth, forcing the audience to assemble the bigger picture while always staying just slightly ahead of the characters. This creates an uneasy complicity. We're waiting for them to overcome their biases, paranoia, and blind spots, and dreading the moments when they fail, or when they persecute the wrong people. The film's nonlinear structure generates horror in several ways. It builds mystery since the gaps between fragments invite us to fear the worst. It constantly reframes the story, with each chapter adding new context that alters our understanding of earlier events. It shifts genre and tone fluidly, keeping viewers perpetually off balance. And with this, it mirrors trauma itself, which is rarely experienced in clean arcs, but instead through fragments, rumors, distortions, and half-remembered truths. Real communities enduring tragedy live in this fractured space, and Weapons reflects that by showing grief, paranoia, and prejudice rippling outward until the story itself feels splintered. The grounding in real-world anxieties makes the film even more unsettling. The missing children evoke echoes of school shootings, unsolved abductions, and parental dread. The town's paranoia and suspicion recall witch hunts, suburban secrecy, and the failure of communities to protect their most vulnerable. Each chapter reveals not just a slice of the mystery, but also the biases of its narrator, the suspicion of neighbours, the persecution of the innocent, and the failure of authorities. As with Barbarian, the scariest part is not the supernatural, but instead in Weapons it is the way that human fear distorts perception and corrodes trust. Creger has cited films like Psycho, Audition, and Pulp Fiction as influences, works that he sees as having broken cinematic rules and redefined how genre storytelling could function. He isn't the first to experiment with fractured timelines, and he directly credits Magnolia with this influence. But what makes his work so distinctive is the way that he makes narrative itself the source of fear. In Barbarian, the shock was in the pivots, and in Weapons, it lies in the fragmentation, in the way that the story refuses to come together until the final two chapters, where finally explanations begin to emerge. But by then, the dread has already taken root in the audience. Both films force us to interrogate judgment. Who seems dangerous, who seems safe, and how often are we wrong? Barbarian reveals the cruelty of snap assumptions and the reality of evil that hides amongst us, while Weapons explores how paranoia can fracture communities, leading to witch hunts and misplaced rage. In both cases, horror stems not from monsters, but from human blindness, the refusal to see what is right in front of us. something his films too tried to hide from us, the audience, for as long as possible. Just like the characters within the films, we are also blindsided by what the true horror is until Creger finally decides to reveal it to us. But by then, it's too late. Most people are already gripping the edge of their seat. Creger's films refuse to deliver fear as a neatly packaged product. Instead, they mirror the messy, fragmented ways that fear exists in real life, through distortion, abrupt shifts, and things that remain unexplained. He embraces the creative freedom of horror, guarding its mystery by resisting marketing that spoils its surprises and refusing to tie his endings into neat resolutions. His aim is not just to frighten in the moment, but to create horror that lingers, unsettling our very trust in storytelling. Just when we think we know the film we're watching, he changes the genre, tone, or perspective, reminding us that horror is not only about the monster in the basement, but instead is about how we misinterpret the world around us. And when those misreadings fail, when our fear targets the wrong people or places, the dread cuts deeper, exposing a cultural anxiety more chilling than any creature. The evil may be hiding in plain sight, disguised by the banality of suburbia. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Creger's films. Do you think he can continue to use a similar structure in his next film? Or do you want to see something fresher? Personally, I don't mind and put my full faith in whatever he decides to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos and my social media links in the description.